Lovely. I'll send it to you, a copy to you first, and we'll see how we go. Looking forward
Okay.
to it. Yeah. So thanks for joining us on the social work race, guys. You know about this channel. This is the channel where we have a space as frontline workers, professionals, to express ourselves. We also have a space to learn. And for those coming into the profession, this is your space to really get first-hand, second-hand experience. That's right. Is there such a thing as first-hand, second-hand experience? I think it is. Yeah. So here we go. Please share, please subscribe to the channel. Please let others know that it's here. It's really helpful. I just want to say today we are speaking to another professional, someone I look up to, who, secretly, respect in their role, because I think when you spent a few years as a professional in this game and you don't look like you're worn out, or you don't look like you're being burnt out, or that it's too much pressure or stress, it means that you are built for the job. And people like that I will always look up to. Philippa, it's what I see in it. It's what I see. It could all be a facade. I don't know. It could all be. But I just want to introduce you all to Philippa, and then we'll look at her job in early help. So Philippa, please introduce yourself. Just tell us who you are and what you do, and then we'll take it from there.
So my name's Philippa. I work in early help. I senior early help worker. So that means I manage a caseload, but I also manage staff. But I manage like a small, complex caseload as well as staff.
Early help. Please tell us what early help is for those of us who have no idea.
So the mantra of early help is supposed to be the right help at the right time. So it's getting service to families before we get to that statutory level, so they don't have to get to social work level where things are at that point are getting quite critical. So so there's four tiers. So first tier is universal services. Universal services are like schools, hospitals, places that anyone have access to, and through those services you can get. So at school, if school can put in intervention if there's issues with children, and then if it's above universal services, then early help is at what we call tier 2, while social services is what we refer to as a tier 3. So it's trying to reduce families getting to tier 3 and trying to offer them support at the earliest point. Whether we're doing that at the moment is left to be questioned, because I'm finding that we're not actually getting to the families in time. We're not actually not reaching them. Sorry.
You went straight there, like, I'm like,
yeah, but I can't beat around the bush.
No
It is
beating
what
around the
it
bush.
is.
No, don't change a thing. I'm gonna work with you, but that's fine because you've told them where we're going. And I guess I'm always using this term. It's a bit like what was it, the Wizard of Oz? There was someone behind the curtain. What's behind the curtain of it all? What's
Right.
behind the curtain of society? You're trying to stop people from coming in to a critical stage,
Right.
or critical service. It's a bit like the GPs are trying to stop the public from having to end up in A&E, but they end up there
Yes.
anyway.
Yes.
And I don't know if we can explore why, because you've opened that can of worms.
Mm-hmm.
But before we go into that now, I want to know a little bit more about you, maybe a little bit of your history. You're in this role. How are you liking the role? How are you work? How's the role working for you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I started out in youth offending, and I think at that point, before youth offending, I was in the NHS, and I've always had kind of, but it was more admin role in the NHS. And I've always had kind of a curiosity around why people are the way, around just behavior, curiosity around behavior. So then I decided to study criminology. So I did a criminology degree, and then I did a criminology master's, criminology and criminal justice master's, and then I went into youth offending. I enjoyed working with youths, but what I recognized was a lot of the work that I was doing was being undone because it was being done in silo with just the young people. So I wanted to kind of expand that and look at the whole family. So from that point, I went into early help where I could just work with the entire family. So I have a more holistic approach rather than just helping the young person. And the young person, sometimes they would come back and they would say, this is happening at home and that is happening at home. But with youth offending, if there isn't a parenting order, there isn't much you can do around the parenting, is there? So that's what kind of led me to early help. I love my job. I thoroughly enjoy my job. There isn't any 2 days that are alike in this job. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. But I do enjoy it.
You and I have got a similar history, although I don't have as many degrees as yourself and masters.
Don't worry about that. It's the experience that counts.
Right.
I love learning. I actually just love learning. I love knowledge. So I probably will be forever a student.
Studying, yeah, but always,
Yes.
and I like knowledge, but I don't want to study for it. That's the difference between me and that. But that's powerful. So we have a similar history because of youth offending experience, which is interesting frontline work. I don't know if you did any court work, but it's like, but you're meeting them. They have to meet you, and they have to engage with you, and you're like, it's frustrating because you're like, I'm working with you, but the system that you're from, the family, your ecosystem, your environment, can we tap into that? And I think that's what you were saying. Can we tap into your environment and make changes there? And that's where early help comes in as well. Yeah. And give us a synopsis maybe of the types of cases that you're getting.
Gosh, it varies. It varies from families at risk of being homeless to children experiencing anxiety around school attendance, families who, so we get sometimes work that have been stepped down from social care. So then they're no longer in the statutory phase. And so what needs to happen is kind of tidying up, doing some intervention to which allows the family to be sustainable, to move on and no longer need services. So with that, we do get cases that were previously child in need and or child protection, domestic families who are experiencing domestic violence, families who are separated and have issues parenting together, families where there is child to parent abuse. I'm going to call it that. Child to parent abuse. Or vice versa, parent to child kind of abuse. Some of it, well, when it's physical, normally gets to the social care, but a lot of the time it's verbal or psychological, and that's harder to pinpoint. You really need the time and the effort to sit there and listen to the stories and unpick them. So, and then if that's the case and you're finding abuse, then whether you step it up to social care. So it really varies. And I always say a case will come and it will be about school attendance. So their school attendance is below what the government says, 90%. And a case with school attendance is never about school attendance. Never.
So it's just a symptom.
It's a can of worms. Whenever I hear, oh, this is a quick case, you're just going to go in, do some work, and I see school attendance, I said,
you never believe it.
No, this is never quick. Because there are so many issues that is causing that school attendance. And so it's never really simple, but I do enjoy it.
Cans of worms being opened. Curtis has got to manage them. I mean, is I think one of the skills that we need to learn is learning to see the causes from the symptoms.
Wow, that's
Mm. Because, like you just said, and I'm just repeating what you're saying, school attendance is not about school attendance, it's why.
no,
And as soon as
no,
you
it's
get into the
why.
family, you start to see a lot. Often you'll start to see, oh, that's why.
It's a culture. Sometimes it's just a culture.
Yeah.
No one in that family likes school. No one in that family wants to go to school. But even within that culture, where did that culture come from? Where did it start? So it's unpicking. But when you say looking at the causes rather than the symptoms, that takes time. That
Mm,
takes building trust with families.
yeah.
That takes being non-judgmental. That takes being empathetic. And we work in services that we are constrained by time, and we are being
What do
fed
you mean?
daily
What do you
about
mean?
constraint by time. You cases come in and you need your cases to be done and closed by a certain time.
So what you're
There,
saying that there are time limits for
there
working
are time
on.
limits. There are time limits for working on cases. They don't expect you to be working on a case for over a year, um,
Mm,
or, or 2 years. You should kind of wrap up the most pressing issues and allow the family to work on some of them on their own, because you don't want to get family dependent on services either. So it's that balance. It's that balance of equipping the family with the tools that they need to function effectively and to adapt to
mm,
whatever challenges they're going to be faced with after you've left them. But it's also that balance of being there long enough to implement them with the skills, to understand what the causes are to the symptoms that you're seeing, so you can give them the right skills for those causes. For
So some families you're going to look at and think this is, well, or assess, should I say, after your assessment, you're like, this is going to be longer than a year,
Mhm, mhm.
but I don't have a year.
But I don't have a year. So then you have to balance what is the most important, because you will never be able to fix it. You're not Nanny McPhee. You will never be
Mm,
able to fix everything with a family. And that's why I said you have to give them skills so they can adapt to whatever challenges that are going to come after you've left. This is life. It's
mm,
always moving. There's risk everywhere.
mm,
So you have to help them to know how to maneuver those risks or maneuver those adversities that are coming.
mm.
And that's if they want to, because some families don't want to
I love it.
or afraid of change. They're afraid of change.
I hope those that are listening just really kind of, you have to digest this now. If you're just coming into the game, you have to digest this now. Some people will just reject you at the door.
Hmm.
And some people will, rather than learn, rather try to lean on you
Hmm. Hmm.
for every little thing. And I guess that's a real balancing act for us.
Hmm. Hmm.
What, as a side note, or sort of side note, what was the impact of lockdown from your experience?
On families or on myself?
No, not on yourself,
On families,
yeah, yeah.
gosh, the impact of lockdown, I think we're still yet to see the full
Ah,
impact. We are still yet to see. Um, Mental health, as it stands, is that there's a crisis that's in mental health, because the amount of children that had kind of didn't have that much issues around school attendance, around the anxiety levels among children have escalated. Issues around how they even cope with their anxieties, so self-harm, um, the fear level amongst children have escalated. Children have stayed at home during lockdown, and have there was no safe space for them, because we also have to remember, not for every home is not a safe place for every child. So the impact of a lot of it is yet to come. Some of it we are seeing there are a lot of children that haven't returned to school.
really?
There are a lot of children that have not returned to school. and are anxious about school, anxious about leaving the house. Because I think this kind of fear was built up around going out, contracting the disease, and that kind of just snowballed into other things.
But we're seeing this in adults as well.
Yes.
People are, well, where I live anyway, in
Hmm.
London, there's a lot of people still wearing their masks.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that they shouldn't. What I'm saying is that it's the fear factor
Hmm.
and how that may impact um, their home life or their life. And if
Hmm.
adults are doing that, the children are going to do it too. Why not?
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm. The impact of
It's
fear.
Yeah, it's the impact of fear, and I think I'm not saying we should not have reported it. We shouldn't have told people to take care of themselves, but
Mm.
in the manner in which it was reported, I think it has got into some people's psyche in a particular way and has kind of crippled them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm surprised that some kids haven't come back, or you say a lot, or you know more than we do because you're at that early stage. We just deal with the crisis.
Hmm.
Um, but that's really interesting to know.
But
Uh,
domestic violence went up. We knew that crisis around how many women we had to be moved because in during lockdown, domestic violence escalated
I think
because
it
there were.
doubled at least doubled. At least,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And the impact on the children.
And the impact on children, they're having to witness that.
Mm,
The impact that school, there was no breathing space in that school, was that place that you could go to. And for those, how many hours school is, for those hours, you didn't have to worry about anything. You
mm.
just you got respite. School was that respite space, and that was no longer there. You were stuck at home.
Wow. I have to take a pause on that. 6 hours a day is a
Hmm.
savior.
Hmm. 6 hour day, 5 days per week was a savior, and that was removed.
Mm.
And then if we add in time to travel to and from school, 7 hours. You get 7 hours away from your home as a break, depending on on your home life, and that
Mm.
was removed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not all children have access. Okay, so during lockdown, I the DFE gave out laptops, so I was out delivering laptops to some of my families, and um, I never. I went to a house, and the state of the home, gosh, it
Yeah.
still worries me. But the young person literally cried when I gave her the laptop.
Why?
Literally cried because she's never had a laptop, and she was at home really struggling to complete her coursework, um, and she, as far as she's concerned, no one has ever given her anything. um I was actually kind of surprised when she started crying. I thought something was wrong, and she explained, and when she explained it, I thought, wow. So not everyone at home during the lockdown had the resources to still continue their education.
I just have to be silent right now. Mm.
So what we're really thinking about educationally is you're having year
Mm.
seven children who are
Mm.
really year four children. And we all know secondary school transition is difficult because they're leaving a space that's smaller. They're used to just being in one class, one teacher. That emotional warmth of secondary school is really nurturing. And then they get to of primary
Primary.
school is
Yeah.
really, and then they get to secondary school. You have to move classes, you have to find your classes, you have to be there on time, you're just expected to be a lot more independent. And that transition is difficult for a lot of students, and they usually have what I call wobbles during those transitions. Now, you left school. Lockdown happened in year 4, halfway in year 4, and then for some young people, by the time they got back, they were ready for secondary school.
Yeah.
So what you're really having is a year 4 child in secondary school.
Yeah.
That gap is quite large. And then they struggle in that space. So you have children also that would have things that would have been picked up on in those later years didn't, so they didn't get the assessments that they needed. So now
Mm.
they're in secondary schools, and those and they are struggling, and those referral comes into us because school have that universal service has put what they need in place to support those children, and it's not working. So then they come to us, and we do our assessment, and we're exploring with the family what's happening, and then we realize actually this needs another service. This child needs probably another assessment to ensure that they get the support they need in school, or we're finding this school isn't the right setting for this child. This child is not going to function well in mainstream school. How did this get missed? Because we were in a lockdown.
I feel guilty. Let's take a sip. Take a sip.
It's hard. We do what we can.
Do you know what? Because when we're doing our assessments, I think what's been missing, and this is an interesting point, what's been missing is the impact of lockdown from our assessments. And you've just woken me up to that. I've always known it to be a thing, but not to count it as a possibility for some of the families we're working or children we're working with. That actually lockdown, they're responding to it.
Yeah,
Or
and also, you also have children coming out of lockdown that have experienced bereavement.
Yeah. And this was a different type of bereavement as well.
And this is a different type of
euphoria of it
exactly.
all. Yeah.
So in terms of professionally and even personally, I've known people that have gone through the bereavement process during lockdown and really have struggled with it. And one of the things I have said to them and reminded them is that there is nothing wrong with struggling around bereavement. That's normal. But what I also noticed was the normal rituals around bereavement that helps the process were removed because of lockdown. If you really think about it, you would have had for some people they have gatherings, they have people come to their house, they get
Hugs,
to sit together,
kisses, all of
hugs,
that,
talk
food,
about, speak about the stories, talk
have a
about
laugh.
all the things, just reminisce about this person. Then you have the funeral, then you have the gathering after the funeral. All of those are kind of rituals that we engage in when there is a bereavement, and it helps. And all of that was taken away, and then the normal support was not in place for those events. And so of course you're going to struggle. You're watching a funeral on Zoom by yourself. It's the customs of you're in the church and you're crying, and someone comes and they hold you and they give you a hug, and you can just lean on their shoulder and they say, it's fine, it's okay, it's going to be okay. Cry if you must. You're sitting at home watching a funeral on Zoom, and you're wondering why you feel like you're losing the plot, because your emotional support isn't there. The safety net that used to happen, the safety has been taken away. Now, this is, for me, it's not an indictment on whether the government did well or didn't do well. I'm just saying there are other knock-on effects from the lockdown that we are yet to really, really think about.
Yeah. And I like that you said we don't know the impact yet. We're going to have to wait quite a few months, I think maybe near the end of this year, to see what's happened. And I think on top of that, there is a financial crisis that is taking place.
Gosh,
I mean, I don't. There's another. I've got about 3 more questions for you, but we're getting into it. Hopefully, the listeners will appreciate it. But we're getting ready for, and this is where early help comes in. More so, what's coming as a result, and that whole mental health aspect. I remember I spoke to someone this week, and they were talking about someone being they work in a hospital, and this lady came in, her face was beaten up quite bad, and she said, "Yeah, my husband, he's because of the lockdown, he's not able to earn the money. His job is changing, and not that we're justifying here, but everybody's attributing it to money and lockdown. And whenever you see, in my opinion, whenever you see someone beating another domestically,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just violence; it's a mental health
Mm-hmm.
crisis as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't justify that behavior, but again, I think we're at the another beginning of something else that is
Mm-hmm.
going to have a
Mm-hmm.
similar impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I say it's important for when we're engaging with families, we give them tools to manage difficulties. We can't say exactly what the difficulties are, but you give them tools, because what we probably also, for me, sometimes I explore with families are, so what's your family script? What were you taught around how you deal with troubled times? Because for some people, they are taught we don't talk about it.
Mm,
And if you are taught that when troubled times comes, you don't talk about it, and you live with a partner that wants to talk about the money troubles that you're having,
yeah,
how do you you are not even recognizing that actually this person is triggering me, and they are going against some kind of core belief that I have. And then again, how do you respond to when do you know when you're being triggered? I sometimes ask young people, do you know when do you know when you're about to get angry? Do you know what happens? Do you know how you feel? Um, what does your body say to you? What's happening when you get angry? Tell me do you know some of the signs? And more than often, a lot of them don't. And sometimes when they will say, what do you mean? And I say, well, I know when I'm getting upset. My ears starts getting quite hot. My ears start getting hot. My body temperature goes up. I know I need to exit the conversation if I start if almost like my mouth is dry,
yeah,
because it's almost like, okay, so my brain isn't even working in the way that it should to process the information with us in a logical way. So that means I need to take a break, because after that point, it's probably going to be anger. So it's teaching for me. Sometimes I
yeah.
teach young people that
There's
so
a
they
level of
know when to
therapy.
exit a situation.
So you're teaching. It's almost like one of. I wanted to look at interventions. A
Hmm.
very brief look at interventions. So you're offering a level of therapy for the family.
Hmm.
So an early help practitioner will explore with the family
Hmm.
areas of development, areas, trigger points,
Hmm. Hmm.
form of
So
therapy. Yeah.
so we in our assessment we use genograms. So with
Mm.
genograms, if done correctly, you get to see patterns, scripts, beliefs within families, because once
Throughout the
you're
generations.
by the generation, because a genogram will involve minimum of 3 generations. And while you're doing that, you will look at it, and sometimes it's quite surprising, because when we're doing it with some families, they haven't had it done before, and I will and they will see the pattern, they will see it, and it will be kind of surprising to them to say, hold on, I didn't realize that my mum or my grandma experienced domestic violence, my mum experienced domestic violence, and now I
Mm.
am experiencing domestic violence.
Yeah.
And I think they will probably start blaming themselves, and that's where some of the work starts, in terms of actually, this is not about blame. This is about understanding, and kind of, is it that I am not saying that you're there because you've seen it growing up, but how were you taught to manage in relationships? How were you taught? What examples were you shown on what does it mean to be a female in your house? What does it mean to be a male in your house? Um, and it's kind of that kind of intervention. Like I've always said, even on a personal level, I'm a mum, and sometimes I get upset because I'm human, and I will shout. And my child will attest to that. I will sit her down. I will say, I will do things, and I need you to know that that is because I am struggling to manage my emotion, not because of what my response is. Not yes, it may be of what you've done, but I've chose to respond it in that way. So you don't need to own. You never need to own my response.
But that's teaching emotional intelligence.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a massive
So
lesson. That's a massive lesson. For your own home, that is a massive lesson.
I think it's needed, because other than that, we walk around and we take on a lot of things that has nothing to do with us.
Yeah. Because it would be great when your daughter, sooner rather than later, will say, my mum taught me to not take on other people's behaviors, but to own
Exactly.
mine, learn mine, and be aware of mine.
Be accountable for what you have done, but how someone reacts to you, they have to account. They have to own that, but you have to be accountable for your part in the situation. But
Yeah.
like, so I didn't make you hit me.
Yeah. Love it.
You have to own that part.
Yeah. I hit you. I chose to.
Exactly. Now, why you chose to is a different thing. And that's something for that person to go and figure out. And it's not your responsibility to figure it out
Mm,
either. Why they chose to, because
mm,
you don't need to always rescue people.
mm, mm. Okay. I mean, Philippa, we've had you on a different show before. You are highly insightful, and you're leading me down a path that I can't go down, because I want to talk about a lot of things that you're talking about.
Hmm.
But I will be in trouble with myself if I did.
Okay.
Um, but I think, and I always put everyone on the spot when they come on the show. Part one,
Mhm.
part two, please. Th-
Okay.
Thank you, thank you in advance. But I want to talk about some of the interventions that early help provides, or is able to
Hmm.
provide now. I know
Hmm.
there's been a lot of cuts. I
Hmm.
know,
Gosh, yeah.
right? But what are some of the classic interventions that early help uses?
So even sometimes the way you do your assessment is an intervention.
Huh?
The way
Okay.
you do your assessment, a genogram within an assessment is an intervention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I get told by our service manager all the time that a referral is not an intervention; it's an action.
Okay. This is philosophy.
Um,
I'm loving it.
yeah, it's because usually we make referral to CAMS, or we make referral to a kind of a
Ah,
mentoring service, and they're like, "No, that's not an intervention. You've done an action, but it's not an intervention. An intervention is when you actually do some direct work with the family."
okay. That's good philosophy for practice. Yeah.
So for me, sometimes the interventions vary. So I think quite holistically, in terms of when I go in and I'm doing an assessment, and different elements of our assessments are kind of intervention. So like we do a strength-based part in terms of just getting the family to talk about their strengths, nothing else. Their individual strengths, their family strengths, their strengths around their culture, strengths around their peers, strengths around school. So and it's so refreshing sometimes when you sit and you watch, maybe even the mum talks about the strength of their daughter or their son, and you look in on that child's face, and that child probably has never heard their mum speak about them that way,
This
vice
is it.
versa.
This is it. They've never heard it.
and
Yeah.
and then you use that to to have a deeper conversation around, okay, so you talk about these strengths, how can we incorporate them in your daily life so we can see more of it?
Mm.
And you set them tasks, and you follow up on those tasks.
Right. Right. I like. I'm enjoying. I would love to meet your manager. Is it your service manager?
Yes.
We could all, probably all three of us, have a nice philosophical discussion around
Mhm.
our approach to interventions.
Mhm.
That sounds powerful.
Yeah. But it's not static. It's not a static thing. People would like to think, okay, so if you say intervention, it has to fit in these boxes. It
Mm.
it literally it doesn't. I have it's fluid, and you have to adapt to the family. So I've had very hard to reach young people that really what I've asked them is, what do you like to do?
Yeah.
I try to engage with a young person for about 2 to 3, almost 3 months, and um, one day I said, "Do you want to go out for lunch?" And he said, "I don't have any money." I said, "You don't have to pay. It's fine." He said, "Okay." And I said, "Choose anywhere." And he chose. And I sat there. He didn't really talk to me. I think he was hungry because he bought a lot of stuff. And and I said, and the manner he was eating, I said, "Do you want anything else?" And he's like, "Are you sure?" So I said, "No, no, order what you want. I'm fine." And then I started asking him about what he eats at home or what's his favorite meal at home. And then I realized he wasn't really being fed at home.
Mm.
So interventions doesn't have to be in the box. And for this young person, I also knew he liked cars. So we organized a day out with at one of the car racing place.
Now hold on. This is a family in a level of crisis.
Mhm.
What has that got to do with you helping that family?
So so one, when we took that young person out of the space, it gave the parents a respite.
Mm.
So, and two, taking that young person out of that space, in some ways, he kind of just relaxed, and it created trust, because you need trust to engage with this family. They need to know you care. They need to know you're not just another practitioner that's going to come in, complete your assessment, and not even tell them bye. Because there's so many families that I've gone into where they've like, oh, the practitioner left, I didn't even know they closed the case. And this is not me judging practitioners. There may be multiple of reasons why that has happened, but families want to know you're there because you care.
Mm.
And sometimes the small things build trust.
Mm.
And from that space, you can actually get to uncover and unpick what needs to happen in order to put in more interventions. So that young person, when we took them out, spoke to me more than they spoke to me for the rest of the time I had that case open.
Food always wins.
Yeah, and spoke about what he wanted to do with his life. Um, just kind of spoke about some of the challenges around what was happening at home. And if I'm being honest, because he's always been kind of, some would say, aggressive in some ways, challenging. I saw him as a child when he spoke, and there are sometimes when we see when they engage with us in a particular way, because we're human, we get frustrated and we just want to say, oh, they don't need any help. I saw him as a child.
Yeah. Which they are, right?
Which they are, really, which they
Mm.
are. And for them, they've built up walls because they're scared. They've built up walls because they've been let down. They've
Yeah.
built up walls because their main caregivers that they were supposed to trust have betrayed them, have
Mm.
harmed them in certain ways. So how are they going to trust you, a practitioner
Mm.
that they've never really met before, probably coming into their life, going to walk out?
Mm.
They know some of us who are here intentionally. In the same way we can go into a room and we can just have a feeling about certain things. Families know, young people know.
So this leads me on to this point. I mean, we had a brief chat earlier on. I'm going to throw it at you. Seeing
Mhm.
people as numbers.
Seeing people as numbers.
Workers, professionals seeing clients,
Yeah,
receivers as
I
numbers.
think that's I think that's probably a top-down thing that trickles down. It trickles down to the practitioner. Because if a practitioner is, most practitioners that I know are in there because something drew them to this kind of work. After a while, people may lose empathy, or they burn out. But that's a different story. When they came in here with a zeal of wanting to help others.
Yeah.
The idea around numbers get trickled down because um, there has to be a balance around the numbers, making sure that the data um, is correct, and we are the data is saying we are actually helping families, and the data the data saying we're helping families, and the data saying how many families we're going to see,
Okay.
and the
Okay.
data
Let me
saying
let me
how
let me
often
catch
we're
you.
seeing them.
Let me catch you here.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just going to think carefully about what I'm going to say,
But
because
remember, the data is what gets us paid.
what I'm just going to say, numbers are needed, but I think I can honestly say that they do interfere with the work that we could do,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
they do interfere with how impactful or effective we might be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm listening to you talk, and I think you being on the front line, um, numbers are probably more of a complication than they are a benefit.
Yeah, so we get our funding based on numbers. So we get every organization that does the work we do, they get out their funding sometimes based on numbers. So how many families have you seen in the last year? Because that will dictate how many resources you may need for next year.
Mm,
Um, how do you demonstrate that you have made an impact on these families? And that's where the numbers come in. Now, there has to be a balance between, okay, so we know we need those numbers because those numbers are what gives us funding so we can help these families. But we also need to balance to know that actually those numbers should not be at the forefront when we are helping families. So we can't say, actually, you can't help them for longer than 2 months because we need we need to get another family in to get the numbers up.
turnover.
Yes, the turnover. We need that turnover.
That's a sad set of politics.
But the thing is, and when I say top down, it's not necessarily top down even within the organization. We're talking about top down from government, from that level, from
Yeah.
policy levels.
Yeah.
It's not just the local level because the government want to remain in power, so things don't stay in place long enough sometimes to have sufficient time to change is hard because what they're looking for is that, okay, so you're going to go in there and change someone's life. I never think I'm going in there to change their life. I'm going in there to support you how I think you need to best to be supported, or how you tell me you need to be supported. I can make suggestions,
Yeah.
but those numbers, it starts from central government and then
Could,
it trickles down to
could,
local government.
and the question and answer is: could those numbers be about genuine success or progress? Then I think we could. Yeah.
Um,
No. What I'm saying is, it would
mhm.
be. I should word this differently. It would be nice if those numbers were about: are we making an impact,
Yeah, exactly. Are we
or
making an
are we
impact?
doing good work? I
Are
guess.
we doing good work? And
Yeah.
are we going to allow that time for that work to be
Yeah.
done?
Yeah.
Are we thinking about these families as families, or are we thinking about them as numbers?
Yeah. And that is
Because
why I hear people talking against management sometimes. I'm saying to them, look, it's the politics. They have a different set of parameters to manage. and
Mm-hmm.
some managers are there because of the numbers. That's their job.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at that, we look up and we think that's disgusting, but that's a part of the game, and it's not always your line manager or service manager's problem. It's not their politics. They're just managing what is on the table.
But
Um,
as someone who manages it myself, I have to balance that number, because I have to say, why is this visit not done? And that is sometimes that is about number, and that is also around about the person. Because the reason is that sometimes it's about number is that family may not need a visit every week.
mm,
That practitioner may need a time out to actually reflect on the last visit in order to formulate an intervention for the next visit. That practitioner may really need to sit and reread their home visit to see if they what themes is it bringing out that I didn't miss because I was in the flow of it. Now, when
mm,
you're writing, I know when you're writing stuff up, you pause and you think, hold on, I'm writing this, but why didn't I challenge this when then? Because you were kind of busy, maybe taking jotting down notes, or you had to challenge something else, or you had to offer advice on something else. So it's the balance of the numbers in terms of when the family needs to be seen, and when there can be maybe a gap.
mm.
But in some cases it's like, okay, they need to be seen weekly, and some families don't want to see you every week.
Yeah.
You're not a part of their family.
And just to bear in mind that early help is what is a voluntary
It's
service.
a
So
voluntary it's a voluntary service, we would like to think, but yeah, it's a it's a voluntary service that sometimes operate as if it's statutory.
it's offered as statutory.
It sometimes operate as if it's statutory.
Okay. Well, it sometimes operates, as you say,
Yeah.
meaning that is that like what, a court order?
No, it's in that some families aren't even aware that they can say no.
Oh, right. So,
And some families,
so we're like, we're doing this, even though it's voluntary, we're doing this.
yes,
Right.
yes.
And
And some families will say no, and you will go back and you will go back and you will go back until the family say, okay.
yeah. And I guess it's important that we do that.
In some cases, it is
Mm,
important. In some
mm,
cases, it is.
mm,
And in some cases, there are some families that if if you are if you are, I don't want to use force, but if you are offering the help before they're ready for it,
ah,
it has no impact.
or it can reverse, it can build up more walls,
Exactly.
maybe. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm. I have a question. I think it might be the last one. We'll see.
Mhm.
What's your, I would say, number one piece of advice? This is this has got you like you have to be ready for this show. Do you know that?
Mhm.
Your number one piece of advice
Mhm.
for professionals such as your guys or even social workers
Mhm.
who engage with families,
Mhm.
what would you say?
Balance your empathy with professional boundaries. We are working in this kind of social care field. We see a lot of adversities. We see families at their worst, and it is a lot to be going in and hearing some of the stories and the narratives and seeing people living in a certain state, and you will have empathy. But if you are running at that stage every day, 5 days a week that you're in work, you will burn yourself out. So you have to balance. You have to know when to switch off. You have to know, you have to use the support systems that are in place to talk about the things that have worried you. um, you have to know when it's time, because some professionals don't, they have, they build, I don't want to say a bond, but they have a liking to some families. So because of that, and because your empathy towards it, you may miss risk. And so a case may need to be escalated, and it's not because that empathy. So you have to balance that empathy to you cannot be in this role and not be empathetic, but you cannot be in this role and be all empathetic.
Yeah. So you got to balance it. Yeah. To protect yourself.
To protect yourself and to protect the families.
Yeah.
Because what you want, you're offering support, you're not enabling. You're offering support, you are not rescuing.
Talk to me now.
So we have to know that when you go in there and you offer, and we're working with families, you're hoping to leave them with skills to function without you. You do not want them becoming dependent on services. So you have to work with them in a way that allow them to have that, to empower them in a way to have those skills to go away. Not saying that that family will never need, because I have families where I've closed the case, and what happens is they will call me up. I'll say, even though it's closed, you can give me a call, and they'll have a moment and they'll say, this is what's happening, and I simply will remind them of the work that they've done before, and that is enough. That's enough. But if they're having to call you every other day, even after you've closed the case, then that case probably needs to be reopened and go to another practitioner, because they've become dependent on you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to, when they call you for advice, or you ask questions. So and the reason you ask a lot of questions of them is that you get them to process things and to get to the answer themselves.
So it's an empowerment driven
Exactly.
process.
Yes.
Yeah. Strengths based,
Mm-hmm.
person centered.
So I think for this profession, that's one of the things I'd say. I would say, if you're not intentional about wanting to support families, don't choose this job, because you've someone's told you it pays well, and I don't know about that, or it's a good qualification to have, or that's what most of your friends were studying, so you went along with it.
First 2-3 weeks on a job.
Exactly. Exactly. So you also have to be self-aware. I think you have to be self-aware in this, because families will project on you.
Yeah. Question. Your number one piece of advice for families working with professionals?
Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask about the complaint procedures either. Don't be afraid to say when you're uncomfortable with something. Ask for what you need. The most they can say is no. We don't provide that. Be protective of your space and be protective of your story. Because I've said it, not because I'm a professional, that doesn't mean I am equipped to manage your story. Because then I've told you, families, they've told you that story, and then you don't know what to do with it. So then you say, okay, I will see you next week, and that person is just left with all of the emotions of what they've just told you, because they've decided to open up to you.
Yeah, you unpack them and then leave them.
You've unpacked them and just left them.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with just being a little bit vigilant as a family, in terms of understanding, okay, is this person capable? I've gone into families where they've said, actually, do you know what you're doing? Do you have children? When I tell them about, and when they ask me if I have children, sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say no. So no, sometimes I will say no because I suppose, okay, so are you saying if I don't have children, I cannot tell you about parenting? Because the no sometimes is depending on the client. Because for me, I want it to stimulate a conversation.
I was just about to say that is
Yeah,
a
it's
good
about
opener because you
stimulating.
can unpack what they're processing,
Exactly,
and they recognize actually she's trying to
exactly,
help. She might be actually
exactly,
really good at. She might be
exactly.
good at her job.
And sometimes,
Mm.
so particularly with young people, because sometimes when I'm doing like one-to-one sessions with them, I ask them a lot of questions. And I say to them at different junctures of my intervention, I say, okay, you get to ask me two questions because I've asked you so much about your life and you must be curious. But within reason, because if they ask me something that I think is quite personal, I will say, sometimes they ask really like trivial stuff. Oh, do you have children? Or, so do you know what you've just told me? Do you do that with your child? And I'll be like, actually, I'm probably stricter with my child. And they'll be like, really, miss? I'm like, yeah, I'm probably stricter with my child.
You have to
And
be.
and even in kind of sometimes I mediate with families. It's about, and when you spoke about intervention, that's another intervention. When you go in and you have parent and child conflict, and you hear the story of the child and you hear the story of the parent, and you're like, okay, so there's a lot of unsaid that's not being said within those conversations. So I sit there with them and pick out the unsaid and get them to tell each other.
Yeah. Mm.
So in this job as a professional, you have to be patient.
Mm.
You have to be patient. And it's okay sometimes to have emotions about certain situations. I've had young people that I've worked with that they've gotten involved in incident and I've sat and cried about it because it's emotional.
Mm.
I've had young people that have been harmed and it's really hurt me to the core. So you have to want to do this. It's something that it's not one of those jobs that you do because I'm not sure what else. I'll do it until I figure out what I need to do. Because you will be left with a lot of scars.
Yeah.
And as a professional, if you're in a setting where you're not growing and you're not being supported because you need to be supported, go where you can grow.
Get out. I just say get out.
Go where you can grow.
You cannot stay in that situation. And in
No,
this type of work, you cannot do that.
no, go where you can grow.
Mm. Can I just say thank you?
You're welcome.
But that was honestly 10 times more insightful than I thought it would be. And we've done a little work before, but this was, I think anyone listening who is considering this type of field, or anyone who's out there, who's considering it is going to say, wow, this is for me or this is not for me. They're going to say it today. They're going to say it today. And I think those who are in the field probably giving you a round of applause right now. We'd appreciate it. Give you a round of applause to say you have spoken for so many people. So it's a really good place of relating, and I appreciate the way you've articulated it so well.
I love my job. I
You
love
love
working
it.
with people. I love my job. I love working with families, even the ones that annoy me.
Yeah.
It's there's a fulfillment that comes from this role.
Mm.
I always say there is this thing of sometimes you go into some families or some or people that you, you have a level of empathy. It's almost like you work with them until you see the light come on. and you're like, yes.
Yeah. That's what we're
And I
waiting
love
for.
that.
That's what we're waiting for.
Yeah, that's it. You
Mhm.
work, you see the light come on, and they realize, hold on, I'm
All this time?
I've just uncovered something about myself.
Why did it take me
I
so long?
I feel empowered, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. Mm. Well, I can't hear the listeners, but if you want a part 2, there is more to talk about. Philippa does have more to say. And one of the things I want to ask you next time is, what is the most common thing that you see? Okay. That's one of the questions I got for you next time. But I want to thank you, Philippa. A round of applause, definitely, because you went
Thank you
in.
for having me.
No, it's a pleasure, of course. I'm going to get another date from you. And guys, thank you. Please share. Please share. Other people need to hear what was said today.
And I've
If not,
actually really enjoyed listening to your podcast. I've been listening, so
really,
you've done
oh, look at that.
yeah, you listen. It's really good. So well done, and keep on. And I've actually learned. I think
Oh,
I've
come
listened.
on. Let's extend this. Go,
I
go, go,
did.
go.
I did. The CAMS practitioner you had on was very,
Him.
very, very insightful. I was like, okay. So
Yeah,
I
because
didn't
Cam's is like
realize,
a secret world in a sense, isn't it?
yeah, I didn't realize CAMS wanted us to say what we thought is happening for the child. I wasn't, when she said it, I was like, okay. Because sometimes for some people, you would think, actually, they may think you're overstepping your, it sounds like you're giving the child a
Right.
diagnosis and you
Right.
want to shy away from that. So her interview was really, really insightful. You had a young lady that spoke about her journey. I think she went through the care system.
Yes.
Well done, well done. I've really actually, even as a practitioner, I've listened to it, and I'm like, okay, I'm learning. And like I've said, I love knowledge and I love learning. So
Oh,
yeah,
and you know what you could do? You could do me a favor. You could send someone my way who you
send
think.
someone. Okay. Actually, I'll try. I'll send you my service manager.
Do that. Do that. 'Cause then we can touch more on the numbers.
Mhm. Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that.
The politics and the numbers. Would love to. I'd love to. Yeah, that would be really nice. Look at that. Hustling on the hustle.
Yes, yes,
Love it.
yes.
I appreciate the feedback.
Mhm.
Thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon, guys. Please share. I'm going to say it again. Please share. Please subscribe. Download. Do what you got to do. It helps us show. It will be on LinkedIn for the most part. Push it out there. Take care of yourselves.
Bye.